Hi everybody, it's Steve Falconet here. Today we are going to finish up our discussion on positivity, negativity, neutrality, when it's good, when it's bad, how it's all determined and where it lands on the change grid. So we're hopefully going to bring all that to closure. And one of the most important things I want to talk about on today's call is how we as human development professionals can help other people to manage whatever their frame is around whatever situation they happen to be dealing with. Because stuff happens. And once stuff happens, that frame suddenly comes into play. So are we putting a positive frame around it, a negative frame around it? And is that frame toxic, or is it kind of like the more, I want to say, positive side of negativity, the positive side, so he said that there's always an upside and a downside to each of these. And so how do we go about helping other people to expand their more beneficial bands and contract the less beneficial bands as we are looking around on the change grid? And one thing I want to say before we even get into that is that I believe that everyone in the human development industry, past, present, and future, does exactly what I've just said. They may not have a particular structure or science around it, but I do believe that in the realm of human development, we do try to help people expand their positivity and reduce their negativity. We do talk to people who are locked in negativity about how to separate themselves and look objectively, which is moving them into neutrality. So we may never have used this language specifically, and certainly we threw this diagram together last time around, and so I know people aren't using this diagram, but maybe they have one of their own. But I think this is what we're basically doing. We are helping other people to become aware of how they happen to be responding to a given situation, and then work with them to better understand whether or not the way they're currently responding is serving them well or not so well. And if it's not so well, how do we help them to explore and adopt other options that may be just waiting for them out there? So that's kind of what this really is all about. Any thoughts about that? Anything you want to throw in before we kind of jump into where we left off? Anyone?
Take it away, T.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So last time around, although we were talking about how toxic positivity and positivity might express itself as we moved around, we seem to be talking a lot about neutrality. And so I thought, you know what, let's just go ahead and scroll to neutrality and see what we can kind of come up with around this. So what exactly is neutrality? How would you guys define neutrality for your clients or in your work? Anyone?
Not holding a particular point of view.
Not holding a particular point of view. Let's expand on that. What else might neutrality or holding a neutral position involve? Tim, this is a good question for you. But yeah, like, oh, Boris, very good. Open-minded. The belief that there are multiple positions and that each of those multiple positions could have merit. And so being open to whatever those might have to include. Denise, I saw you unmuted. What would you like to throw in?
Oh, I was just going to say maybe being more curious about what's real or what's the data or the facts, as opposed to being judgmental and saying, I already know that.
Right, because once we've judged something, once we've taken a position, are we neutral anymore?
No.
No, I mean, I guess we could say my position is neutral, but once you've stepped outside of that neutrality, once you've been open and once you've heard what needs to be heard and seen whatever needs to be seen, you may very well step out of neutrality. Hopefully you're stepping into positivity to kind of do something that has merit around that. Tim, what would you like to throw in?
Well, I'm thinking of the mediation process, and we do function as a neutral in that process, but yet our role is to help guide both parties towards resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So, certainly we do not want to be seen as being in favor of one party or the other.
Right, right, right. And so that's going to be true for people that are serving as a moderator, probably as a facilitator, hopefully as a judge, but Tim, talking specifically about training people to be good mediators, how big of an issue is it, or how challenging is it for mediators to keep themselves neutral?
It's very challenging, particularly when there's a lot of high emotion,
Mhm.
in the exchange. And as you are looking at the data and listening to fresh data, you certainly can find yourself forming a point of view, if you will.
Yeah. And why is that problematic for someone who's in the mediator role?
Well, certainly, if your favoritism is for one party over the other, then that can discredit the process because someone feels disadvantaged and that they never really had an opportunity to have fairness.
Great, 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 great. Now, I wanted you to kind of put that out there in the official words, because one thing that I've said to clients in the past is that my role when I come into these discussions that I know nothing about, one of the greatest things I bring them is the fact that I don't care. So I really have no vested interests in how it turns out one way or another. I would like the truth to be heard. I would like for the right thing to come to the surface and to be readily recognized and acted upon. But I come to you as someone who doesn't really care about the outcome. I care about the process. And at first they thought like, well, how can someone who doesn't care be involved? And I said, the fact that I really don't care in the way that I've just described it, I think is a benefit to you, because I don't have any preconceived notions and I don't have any biases that could impact how I might steer whatever the discussion is that you're all about to have. So, but it does get their attention when you say, I don't really care. Yeah. So I'm sure, Tim, you have a more diplomatic way of expressing that same thing.
Yeah. But that is a distinction between the role of the mediator and the arbitrator, because the arbitrator is concerned about outcome and is influential in the process, as you mentioned.
Is the arbitrator brought in favoring a particular side? Who brings in the arbitrator?
No, team Michelle is AAA certified, and actually she's leaving this Sunday to go down for her annual educational trip to remain certified. But an arbitrator's role is to come in and facilitate a resolution or a decision. And I've heard her talk numerous times before some of these cases that it seems clear, but you have to go in with an open mind. Otherwise, you're not really getting the value of the American Arbitration Association as it's advertised.
Ah, interesting. And so they come in with a neutral position, but they very much care about an outcome arising from whatever the discussion happens
Well, that's
to be.
the point of their being there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, T, as you're talking about process, the process under under an arbitrator is binding, wherein the process under a mediator is not.
Oh, I was wondering what the distinction is between the two.
Yeah.
So the arbitrator comes in and whatever comes out of the discussion is official, decided upon, whatever words we want to describe to that. So I like the idea about it being binding, where a mediator comes in and facilitates the discussion, but that may or may not result in any kind of a definitive outcome. Is that
Correct.
fair to say? Yeah.
Correct.
Yep. So is it fair to say that all arbitrators are also skilled mediators? They're just taking it up a notch.
Yes, I think that's a fair say.
Right, where most mediators, I would imagine, based on how David has just kind of described that, may not really have the authority to serve as an arbitrator.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. So
Yeah, no,
David, what do you have to be? An attorney? Is that who arbitrators tend to be?
Not always. I understand from her in the class that she went through to become certified that there were different people there, but I'd say probably a great majority of them are attorneys.
Okay, all right. But in both cases, they know they're walking into a situation where a conflict is already underway. The conflict has reached some sort of an impasse, and now others have to be brought in to finally bring this to closure.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So when all else fails, we need an arbitrator. All else fails, we need a mediator. So then I'll throw this to Tim. Do you think that people would be better off if they brought in a mediator earlier on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it definitely, the process under a mediator is certainly beneficial.
And
Particularly.
so what if we said it could be valuable for every member of a management team to also be trained in mediation skills?
Oh, yes, because even in the role of the HR person in the corporate setting, there is a role typically for an employee relations specialist, and there's a lot of need for mediation skills in that role.
Mhm.
You're-
Okay,
A
good.
lot of organizations that I'm familiar with have like HR
Mhm, mhm.
aides or whatever you want to call them, coordinators or whatever, and they act as mediators with the groups that they're assigned to.
So they get pulled in at a certain point. And I guess my thought is like, well, while in the early stages of the conflict forming, what if people stepped into a mediator role, even though it may not be official, but they work with these people. If they have the mediation skills, would that be something that we as human development professionals, specifically as trainers, might say, here is a skill set that we believe anyone in management ranks and higher should certainly be fluent in?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's high value in that.
Yeah. Now, is that something you offer in your lineup there, Tim?
Yes, and have done, over the years, both inside the corporate arena as well as outside.
Yeah, I was wondering if you tend to be brought in just by HR departments or legal departments or
Yeah,
whatever.
because it also spills over into the D&I work that I do, particularly when we are working with leaders on
Mhm.
trying to hone their skills around creating inclusive work cultures.
Right. Okay, well, very interesting. Let me throw something out there. Interested to hear you guys weigh in on this. I believe that when we say we work with individuals, we are misrepresenting what the actual work is. I think that anytime we work with an individual, we are actually working with the individual as they present themselves in the current situation, and the individual as they present themselves in their desired situation, and throw in there the individual that they present as the reason why they can't get to whatever their desired outcome happens to be. So I think we've got that current situation individual, that desired situation individual, that obstacle individual, and at a certain point we can pull in the other two steps of the path and say there's probably also someone who's representing the solution and someone else who's representing whatever their gut level emotional feelings, instincts, intuitions happen to be. So anytime I'm sitting down with a single human entity, I know that I'm actually talking to multiple entities, and they could arise and take front and center at any point in time. So how many of you can kind of relate to sometimes we are mediating a situation between, at the very least, the person as they are and the person as they tell us they'd like to be? Anyone, or am I just hallucinating?
No,
And certainly, T, when you're talking about coaching and assisting folks around career strategies, right?
Sure.
Where are they currently? Where would they like to be? And in fact, I've certainly done that. And as you know, using the tool to talk with folks who are in career transition.
Yeah.
And so being able to look at their current situation and versus their desired situation, that gives you great opportunity to talk about obstacles that may be in the way of that.
Yeah.
I would agree with you, T. I think every time you engage someone, especially in a coaching conversation, you've got both those realities to deal with, the current situation and the desired future situation. And our goal is to help them clear a path to the desired future situation and understand how they got to their current situation.
Yep. And along the way, we're going to have to do that obstacle identification so we can come up with solutions to overcome those things.
Yep.
And I just think it's important to kind of recognize that this battle that arbitrators and mediators routinely deal with also exists inside the mind of an individual.
Yeah.
And that tends to be who we work with more often than not, because how many of us forget being human development professionals, just be human beings for a second? How many of you often find yourself, your current life, at odds with the life you see yourself as having or thought you could have had or whatever it is, and or hold yourself back because that voice of obstacles seems to be getting a lot more playtime, airtime than the other ones might. So how many of you recognize this actually unfolds inside of your own little world?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah. And so when we look at these concentric circles, I can say to you that given any situation, if we want to say, as far as this situation is concerned, I'm positive about that, I wonder if that's actually a statement of fact. Or is the fact, as we start to pursue this, some little voice of negativity might come up, some little voice of neutrality might come along. You know, movement on the change grid is constant and can be instantaneous. Yeah, so I guess I'm bringing this all up just so I can say that the work that we do as human development professionals is not as simple as saying, I want everyone to have a positive kind of frame around everything. That's unlikely to ever happen, and it's not necessarily beneficial to the individual. There may be times when we're talking to someone who has a very positive frame around a situation that we introduce some sort of negative aspect to it because they have blind spots, and whether it's toxic positivity and they're just trying to insulate themselves from it, or they really can't see whatever those obstacles may be, we may deliberately open up their eyes to whatever these obstacles that may be waiting for them.
And it all depends on your intent, T. You know, I was talking with Michelle last night as she was driving home, and she said that her CEO and co-CEO came into her office today and told her that they had chosen 2 new members for the executive committee, and so they were letting 2 members go. And you know, she's been doing all this administrative work, all this extra work, all these extra hours, all this effort and energy around the firm to help and try to be a positive member of the executive committee. And they just kind of took it from her. So the option was there to say, yeah, that's a real shitty thing they did. And I did, but I said, let's give it a couple of days. Because you have to look at the person's intent.
Right. And so, as you even said that, you were moving someone out of negativity, perhaps, and into a little bit of neutrality. When we say sleep on it, or we say, let's take a couple of days, let's just take a pause here, whatever it is, what we are hoping is going to happen is that the person is going to get out of whatever this heightened emotional state is that comes along with it, or if they happen to be outgrid, remember these concentric circles go all the way around. So out here they'd be pushing things, pushing and pushing hard, but we're just saying, like, let's just slow down for a second, let's just take a look. We're trying to move people more to that center neutral kind of place. So, David, what would you say is the intention behind moving someone from that heightened emotional or that driven state into a time period of pause and reflection?
Well, they have an opportunity to think and reflect and observe and become aware and just more in tune with things that maybe they were ignoring or purposefully ignoring.
Mhm. And from that, they would hopefully end up making a higher quality decision that would serve them better in the short and
Absolutely.
the long term. And again, when I hear someone say, and we're going to let two people go, I go like, oh my gosh, are they at least going to package that departure in a healthy way? Because if they're this far up grid or that far out grid, what do you think about careful packaging?
Yeah, I always tell people that one of the most important things you can do is effectively exit someone.
Mhm.
And because you don't want to send the message inside that if for some reason all of a sudden you don't fit or there's a problem that we're just going to abandon you. I mean,
Yeah.
that has a tremendous impact on culture and morale.
Yep. Yep.
So
Okay.
T,
Yeah. Go ahead,
T,
Tim.
this is interesting that David just introduced for us to think about, because as I was listening to him, I began thinking about the conflict between the positivity and the negativity. And I remember on one of the prior calls, Brian made the comment about internal and external influences. And I can hear that in the example that David just gave us. So if I think about the two individuals that were impacted by this decision, they could very well have been in positivity,
Mhm.
feeling good about the organization, feeling good about their role there, and et cetera. Yet
Mhm.
the decision was made that had that impact on them, that may have then moved them to that negative energy once they got that.
Right.
My strategy was a diversion a little bit. She recently purchased a business called American Settlement Centers, and she would like it to be competitive with other mediation and arbitration associations and build it up. And I said, well, maybe now's the time we take all of that administrative time you were spending with the firm and everything else, and we pile it into something that's going to directly benefit you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Excellent.
So, just to get her away, because she's like, well, why am I staying here? She's 55 years old, first of all.
Mhm.
Why am I staying here? Should I stay here? Should I leave? And I'm like, honey, it's not, that's reactionary. And, we need to give it a couple of days to
Yep.
settle out and, get our thoughts in line and,
Right.
just let
And
the
good for
emotion
her. She's got
pass.
an educational escape to go on that gives her that little bit of interrupt.
Well, she sent out an email immediately following this meeting saying that she was going to be out of the office from Sunday to Saturday, and the founder of the firm showed up at her door about 5 minutes later, asking her where she was going.
Ha! Okay, then. All right.
So a little bit worried about what they did and the effect that it might have, but the way they handled it was not very effective.
Right. And so she'll end up with a bit of a mess to clean up
Yep.
when time comes back. And let's kind of rewind a little bit to what we've been talking about for mediation arbitration. In both those situations, we already know a conflict exists. And that tells me that both people, let's just say it's two people, but it's two positions, both positions are holding both positive feelings and negative feelings simultaneously. So they're feeling positive feelings about whatever their favorite position is and negative feelings about the other position and vice versa. And so if we look at our little chart here, here we have the arbitrator who's in the middle. And we've got someone, usually when you get into the negative mode, that tends to be more energized, more forceful. If they were down grid around it, I don't think they'd show up for the mediation. They might have feelings around, but they didn't come to the meeting, because this person down grid, the negativity would be nothing's going to change. It's not going to make any difference. So just forget about it. I'll just tell you, I told you so. So why waste the energy around all this? I don't think they're at the table. I hope they're not at the table. And if they are, I hope they're not the only person at the table representing that position.
Well, if they are at the table, sometimes they're there simply because the process requires them to be there.
Pardon me, but they're in an observer mode as opposed to you expect them to say much?
They have a participatory role, but that becomes the challenge of the neutral, is to get them engaged in the process.
All right, very good. But because they're that far down grid, that's a very different job than getting this person who's too far out grid to slow down a little bit, or the person who's too far up grid to calm down a little bit. I don't know that we're going to have someone this far in grid who's basically would be more like, I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to draw any attention to myself. They might exist, but I wonder how they are even in a job role that might require them to attend any kind of a mediation, but they would be caving very, very quickly.
Yeah, the policy may be such that requires them to engage or to participate in mediation.
Right, but again, you'd have a very different job trying to get them to speak up.
Exactly.
Yeah, because that would be the task. If they're too far in grid, they're being very guarded and cautious. We need to do something to get them to have and share whatever it is they think, or what their position happens to be. So I'm going to say that by and large, we're going to have negativity upgrid and positivity upgrid. Forget toxic for a second, just negativity upgrid, positivity upgrid, or outgrid, or both. Hopefully the positivity is more outgrid, because that's more purposeful and driven and intentional, than upgrid, which is just an exciting kind of engaged, sure, let's kind of do it. I think the positivity needs to be a bit more outgrid, but the negativity could be found both upgrid and outgrid. Do you guys understand that? Do you agree with that as I've thrown that out there? Sometimes I think I'm talking about the change grid at layers of depth that people might need a review around. But if you guys go like, oh no, I get it completely, we can kind of move on. Yeah, yep. So Boris, Denise, anybody got anything you want to throw in there? Tim, feel free. I see you. Yep.
Yep. No, I'm saying yes.
Okay, good. All right. All right. So now, the question becomes, how does one deal with the negativity? Because I think the negativity is what is more problematic than the positivity. I get it. People are going to be gung-ho about whatever position is they hold near and dear. I get that. But ultimately, it's the negativity that has to be overcome. As long as the negativity exists, then positivity doesn't have an opportunity to bring anything to closure. I don't think we're going to close things purely negatively. I think the whole point is we want to leave everything on a positive, actionable, intentional kind of place. If we don't do that, then what have we done? What have we really done? So you guys agree with that? That for the most part, the job that we have is to help people recognize and overcome whatever the negativity is, so the positivity has a chance to move front and center.
I would completely agree, T.
Yeah. And so I think the question becomes, how do we go about dealing with negativity? Now, before we launch into, I have a whole list of things, by the way, about how you can cultivate positivity. And if you guys did a little Google on it, you could find 100 more. But I just want to finish off talking a little bit about neutrality versus toxic neutrality. So we started this last time around. We've already characterized neutrality. I'm in the middle, I'm detached. If you go back to your basic training in tension management, you remember me saying things like, when you're in the center of the change grid, you let the winds of heaven dance around you. You understand that one cannot push the river nor pull the sprout. Things have to be allowed to unfold in their own natural sort of time. So you're in the world, or in that world, but not of the world or of that world. So you practice the art of caring detachment. And when we were talking about mindfulness and other personal practices for finding greater peace of mind and all that, we talked a lot about how it's important for you to be able to be in your life, but know how to separate yourself from the details of that life so you can observe it a little bit more objectively, and maybe that'll help you make higher quality decisions about what needs to do next, what you need to do next. And so this idea about neutrality, I think we've talked about a lot of its benefits, but there becomes a problem when the neutrality becomes a barrier to movement. So without me jumping into it, how would you guys characterize what I've just said? So how can neutrality become a barrier to movement?
Well, you're stuck.
Okay, you're stuck.
You're stuck, and you don't want to let go.
You don't want to let go. Why might you not want to let go?
Oh, you're holding an opinion that probably somebody is belittling you or ignoring you, or that the situation isn't, addressing your needs, or
Okay.
something like that, and you just refuse to take a position.
All right. And so most of what you've just said there is about conflict avoidance. So if I stay neutral, I can avoid whatever is going to come my way from the people who might hold another viewpoint. So I don't want to fight with people. I'm just going to stay neutral. Just going to stay neutral. All
Yeah,
right,
the
then.
word for me, T, was non-committal.
Non-committal. Tell me why non-committal. Why would I choose that over committal?
Because if the situation requires resolution, if it requires action,
Mhm.
if I'm non-committal, then I'm not helping the situation, right? I'm not helping something become actionable because I'm not giving my energy in that direction. And that could also be connected to a lack of courage on my part, right? I may be fearful
Right.
of the process, of the journey, of the outcome, or of just trying to get there, right? Maybe
Right.
something gets exposed, etc.
So now, in both of the way you guys have kind of given examples there, I'm hearing upgrid situations and outgrid situations. So I want to avoid whatever the negative impacts may be. I want to avoid the conflict with other people, whatever it is. I'm hearing a lot of upgrid and outgrid. But our little circle here would imply that toxic neutrality could also exist downgrid. And although we rarely talk about anything on the in-grid side of things, it could occur in-grid as well. So Denise, I saw you unmuted a few seconds ago. Do you want to throw something in?
I know he said what I was going to say.
Okay, all right. So you feel free. Okay, so how does toxic neutrality serve as a barrier in a downgrid? And again, it's only slightly downgrid. It's not way down here. It's just leaning downgrid. So what might that neutrality feel like and sound like?
Almost oppositional.
Almost oppositional. Okay, give me an example of that, because
Somebody says we should do this, and you say, no, I don't think they've proven their point.
And right there, your words proven a point carry an analytical energy behind them. So that made it shift slightly downgrid. I'm liking what I'm hearing there. So I'll throw out that I think that remember we said that in order for change to ever occur, someone has to come along and say one word. So what's the one word that happens before change occurs? Anyone remember? Okay, the word is enough. So we've dealt with this long enough. We've shopped around long enough. We're holding back long enough. So once people kind of reach that, it ends up being the threshold of activation. The word that is at the threshold of activation is enough already. So that's what's happening. So I think when you're talking about downgrid toxic neutrality, the person is basically saying, our situation is not bad enough yet. They do not find the current situation troublesome enough to bother doing anything definitive to change it. In a sales situation, this is the person who is content with things the way they are, even though they will acknowledge that things could be better. They might even acknowledge that your solution, they have no doubt could make things better, but they do not find their current situation troublesome enough to bother doing anything definitive to change it, because change involves some level of Well, change, disruption, whether it just means you're going to come along and there's a learning curve involved, or there's a procedural thing that's going to come into play, or you're going to have to deal with people or whatever. You can kind of hear that. So they're saying, no, we're just going to stay neutral. Thank you all very much. But it's holding things back. So how many of you have gone out there to sell human development services that the person will freely acknowledge would be beneficial to them, but they're content well enough with things, and they're not down, they're not in apathy around it. They're just basically saying, well, things really aren't bad enough yet, or this isn't really something that we've got the bandwidth to put energy into right now, so we'll just stay in a holding pattern. Anybody deal with that?
Well, T, not necessarily to your question, but what I was going to add before you pose the question is that if the event does not impact me personally, I could wind up being in that neutrality, right? Because it doesn't. I don't see that it's impacting my situation. So
right.
Why do anything?
Yeah, we see a lot of that when people are dealing with something in their community, and they're all neutral about something until it's coming to their backyard. And then now they have some feelings around the whole situation. Now they've got
that happened in spades in Michigan this week.
Oh yeah, do tell.
Well, there was a high school shooting.
Oh, right, in Oxford. Yeah, terrible.
Yeah. So that got the pot stirred here pretty deeply.
As it should. 4 dead and 7 injured. Is that what the current
4 dead and 7 injured, and a whole high school that was thrown into terror.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know the way Michigan is laid out, Oxford is a northern suburb of Detroit, or a western suburb?
Yeah, northern.
Yeah, up there. So it's in a pretty nice area. I don't think of Oxford as being particularly rural, but it's kind of like an in-between sort of a place, close enough for you so you can have everything you need.
Yeah,
but far enough away.
20,000 residents.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of lakes up in that area, if I remember.
Yeah.
So So this is shocking that such a thing happened. But yeah, there you go. Toxic neutrality. Nothing bad has happened, at least nothing bad enough to happen. So I'm just going to stay neutral here, even though from an analytical perspective, I know that there would be good logic behind doing whatever it is that's being brought forward.
So T, I have a question about this, because
Sure,
for me, the neutrality is the most difficult to deal with. And I'm just wondering if there's some kind of a natural tension with the neutrality being in the center to draw people to either upgrade, downgrade, ingrid, whichever direction, but away from neutrality, kind of a gravity outside. Because I think what happens is that's like the elephant in the room that's quiet and then all of a sudden goes on a rampage.
You are absolutely correct, because neutrality, I believe the neutrality is incompatible with the human life experience. So we've talked about before that we go to the center of the change grid, we take this neutral position. Hopefully we're doing it intentionally in order to gather better information, make higher quality decisions, but we're going to it for a temporary purpose. But then once that purpose is served, we got to get back out to living life. And life is lived out here and up there and down here and over here. Life is really not lived in here. This is a momentary escape. This is a vacation, And so we come in here, and it's very, very, very valuable. Make no mistake about it. It's extremely valuable to have the ability to move to the center and to do so. But it is not the place where change occurs. It's not the place where life is lived. And so I think that any one of the set of change grid maneuvers could be pulled into play depending on what we're trying to help the person do. So maybe we need to do upgrade maneuvers. Shall I put anybody under the microscope and see if you can rattle off the upgrade maneuvers?
Sure.
Oh, all right, go ahead. Yay. All right.
Well, change the task.
Change the task. Yep.
Increase the standards,
increase the standards, yep,
awaken emotions,
awaken emotions,
and something about pride.
nope, that's
Nope.
outgrid. Boost something. What's the second
Boost
one?
accountability.
Boost accountability. Right. So these are the 4 upgrade maneuvers. Good job, David. Yeah. And so if we got someone who's stuck in the middle, well, we can come along and, as David put together, we can either get them to increase the standards against which they're measuring okay. And so my background in sales and the sales training that I've always done, you deal with a lot of people because this is the domain of I want to think about it. And so we have to say, well, how is there a standard that we could say? So if you could see that by using our solution, your efficiency would increase 3-fold and your profits would increase 2-fold and blah, 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 would you then want to do it? So maybe presenting to them a whole set of increased standards that you believe they would benefit from, that your product could deliver, would actually move them upgrid. And maybe it's about changing the test because you know what? This really isn't about subject A. This is about subject B. So this isn't about how your company is functioning right now. This is really about positioning yourself against your competitors so that you don't lose further ground. So that's, now that also, by the way, awakens some emotions. So we would want to awaken the emotions that are more upgrade. Upgrade emotions are anger, grief, fear, and shame. So any of those emotions we could awaken would certainly move them off that center spot. And then the last one is boosting accountability. Now it's tough to do that when you're an outside third party. But if you know that that person is reporting to a board of directors and that board of directors has said to them, you need to accomplish X in terms of metrics by Y in terms of date, reminding them of that accountability that is in front of them could very well move them off of this neutral position. Yeah, go ahead, anyone? Yep.
Yeah, I'm also having a thought because we've spoken at length about this great resignation. And I have a feeling this ties into that because I think there's been a lot of people for a very long time that have been sitting in this neutrality space.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And now it's coming out. And I think part of leadership is it's our responsibility to identify people that are in that space and do something to change their position, as
Very
opposed to having, you know, the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. So all the negativity folks get all the attention.
That's
the
right.
Positive folks get ignored because they're just positive, okay with what's going on.
Right. And
right.
now,
And probably the bulk of the people are neutral.
Right. And now what you really are talking about is how outgrid maneuvers could be pulled into play in order to move something away from neutrality. Anybody want to throw out what the outgrid maneuvers include? Okay. Sure. Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Please do.
I'm waiting. Increase the risk.
Yep.
I'm struggling, T.
Yeah, that's all right. That's fine. Because, you know, these are things that we need to review periodically. The truth is all of you do all of the maneuvers all the time. You just don't put them into my little buckets. And that's perfectly fine. So rather than rattling off what the 4 outgrid maneuvers are, which is, again, just an arbitrary part of a model, what kinds of things do you guys do? If you're saying you've got people that are here in the middle, and we want them to step out grid. We want them to take a greater level of challenge and exercise a higher level of ability. What kinds of things might you say or do with a person who's kind of in this wait and see kind of position to get them moving out grid? Will awaken those driver attributes. Anyone want to throw something? What do you do with a person like that?
Well, you've got to challenge them somehow.
And so the first one you said was increase the risk they're taking.
Yes.
So by increasing the risk, we're saying move into a more challenging situation. Move into a more challenging situation. All right. What's another thing that we might want to do? In fact, it's something that Boris actually alluded to. And so one of the outgrid maneuvers is that we want to inspire someone through leadership to leadership. So we need to let them know that we need people who can step up and take charge of something and run with the ball, and use whatever metaphor you really want. So through my leadership skills, can I awaken the leader within them to move them further out grid?
And
Yeah.
I think to do that, T, you first have to be inquisitive about what is their motivators, right?
Mhm.
What,
That's
what
right.
is it that they really care about in their professional role? Where do they want to go? And then tie the two things together with what the strategic, objectives are. If you
Right.
do that effectively, now they're going to say, oh, I have a reason to really engage. I have
Exactly.
a personal motivator behind this. I'm going to now challenge myself to step up.
Exactly. Otherwise, think about what the neutral person is saying. I have no reason to step out of neutrality. They don't particularly need me or want me to do anything like that. And I don't feel particularly compelled by anything for me to take the initiative and do that on my own. So remember, we said that one of the things that leaders do, leaders believe in people before they believe in themselves. And oh, by the way, we'll throw out another outgrid maneuver, and that was stroke someone's ego, appeal to their ego. So if we can say to this person, we need you, you and only you are the person who can help us do this. And let me give you evidence of why that is. Let me try to connect this to whatever as Boris was saying, what are your objectives? What are your goals? What are your intentions? What can I do to help move you more in the direction that you want to be going? And then the fourth outgrid maneuver, just to finish them off, is that these are the people that we want to provide performance coaching to, not coaching in general, although they could certainly benefit from that, specifically performance coaching. So can any of you tell me the difference between, say, executive coaching, life coaching? What's the difference between those traditional kinds of coaching? It's so funny I'm calling that traditional because performance coaching has been around for a lot longer. But nevertheless, how would you distinguish performance coaching from other types of coaching? Anybody want to throw something out
Would
there?
that be something like sales coaching, something very specific?
It tends to be very specific. It tends to be very skill focused, very behavioral. Tim, what do you want to throw in?
Well, I was just going to say the performance coaching is more aligned with what we call KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the
That's
individual.
right. That's right. And so probably the big hallmark difference between performance coaching and other forms of coaching that we might bring to our clients is that performance coaching doesn't hesitate to be directive. So other forms of coaching tend to want to help the person come up with their own insights, their own awareness, their own strategy, their own solution, their own. People in the world of performance coaching, even if you think of sports coaching as being a form of performance coaching, don't have the time for that and have not been engaged to take the time to do all that. Their job is to come in, quickly diagnose, remedy, exercise, and ensure that whatever that critical skill is can be of great value. And so I think of that kind of coaching as helping someone to conquer in the accountable self. We talk about people suffering from the 90% existence. So they get 90% of the way to 90% of their goals 90% of the time. We want to take them the rest of the way. We want to help them. The other tagline for accountable self is we want to help them become a finisher in a world of starters. And so we know they've already got the vast majority of the skills and the background and the whatever else is important for them to have in order to deliver on the KSAs. Or Boris, what's your combo? What's your letters?
Objectives and outcomes, or OKRs.
OKRs, right. So we believe that the person who is already outgrid is already in possession of the vast majority of what those out. Why do I know that? Why am I saying we know that they can already do most of what they need to be able to do most of the time? Because look at how they rate their ability to be there. right? They're rating their ability 8, 9, 10, 11, even a 12, and they're seeing the challenges being comparable. And so I know that these people have a very, very strong sense of self, but that doesn't mean that they're done with their learning. We need to come along in our role as whether it's as a mentor or whether it's as that performance coach, or maybe it's a one-on-one trainer. And we look at whatever their 360 feedback was, or we look at whatever their performance metrics are showing and say, look, you have an issue when it comes to X. So I don't necessarily want to discuss and debate X with you. I want to say to you, we are here to do this. And so my role as a performance coach is to basically bring that forward, show evidence of it, hopefully get them to own it, but owning it is optional. We can just say, look, it's required and you have to be able to do this. Like going back to David's wife, I don't know that she was eager to go down and do continuing education, but the association says how you feel about it is irrelevant. We'd like you to feel positively about it, but if you don't, you have to come anyway.
No, they sent her an email and said that, you know, she would be delisted if she didn't have her
There you
continuing
go.
education done at a certain time.
And so this is performance coaching. So how you feel about it is irrelevant. You must do the following things if you wish to continue to play at this level of the game. And that's fine. That's all fine and dandy, because whoever's there, obviously for David's wife, she's basically said, no, I get it. I agree with it. So fine, whatever. Hopefully it's good subjects and there's good presenters. You know?
Oh my God. Well, she'll be in Miami, so that's
Yeah.
one
So
positive
hopefully
thing.
at least we've got that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So T, would you say then that the position her organization took was an outgrid maneuver for her?
Probably more of an upgrid maneuver for her, only because I don't know that the association, and it's the association who's imposing this on her. I'm sure her organization is saying like, well, yeah, we expect you to maintain your credentials as an arbitrator. That's why you're here. But I would imagine it's really that whole idea about dangling a threat over your head is really very much an upgrade maneuver.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that where if someone had, let's say she wasn't a certified arbitrator yet, the outgrid maneuver would say, hey, we see so much potential in what you're doing, and we have enough of a need internally that we'd like to have someone on staff who can do all this. So would you be willing to go out there and do all the credentialing necessary, training and credentialing to become an arbitrator? So maybe that happened at some point in time. I don't know how she chose to become an arbitrator. David, is there a story there? Or?
She was just looking at career development, and she saw a good opportunity for that. A lot of attorneys who've retired are still arbitrators, and they'll handle 2 or 3 cases a month, 2 or 3 days a month, and make a fortune.
Yeah. Okay. And so she might have done her own outgrid maneuver and decided that that would be something that could be done. And so, you know, just to kind of bring this to actually, Boris, this ends up being a very long answer to your relatively short question. How do you move someone off? It's by employing the appropriate set of change grid maneuvers. And normally we would, you know, because change is involved, we would need to move someone upgrid or outgrid. The difference between definitive change occurs only 2 places on the change grid: upgrid changes and outgrid changes. Anybody on the call want to make the distinction between what's the difference between upgrid changes and outgrid changes? Anyone remember that? Training. It's based on what they're driven by.
Right.
So outgrid changes are driven by something.
Task.
By task. That's a good way to look at it, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, here goes. Upgrade changes tend to be driven by external factors, and outgrid changes tend to be driven by internal factors. So in the case of keeping the credentials for being an arbitrator, this was driven by an external factor. Someone outside of Michelle, right? Outside of Michelle said, look, if you want to maintain your credentials, if you want to, then you have to do this. That's an external factor imposing itself on her reality, and she chose to respond to it. Where internal factors go back to the second part of it. When I said, okay, David, how did she come to be an arbitrator? And he said, she kind of saw that as life went on, if she took the initiative to become trained and certified as an arbitrator, she'd have a very nice long-term income generating opportunity.
Yep.
And so that's an internally driven change. So change is either going to be driven by something outside of you, in which case it's an upgrade kind of a situation, or something that you have chosen to do. That's an that's an outgrade kind of a change. So that's internal to what was driving it. Change really doesn't occur downgrid. And so I would say to you, I can rattle off the downgrid maneuvers. Those downgrid maneuvers would move the person out of neutrality. Unfortunately, it might move them down into downgrid positivity, where now they're just resting on whatever their laurels happens to be and move on. And I could also move them in grid, but that's not where change occurs. And so we'll ignore the downgrid maneuvers and the in-grid maneuvers to affect the change you're looking at, or there was a inquisitive about. Okay.
Well, if we wanted to be healthy about it, if someone were affected by an upgrade or external resource, we might want to restore their pride to make it more of a mutual decision.
Yes. Right. In fact, one of the greatest things that we do in our role as tension management professionals, at least, is to say, how often do people know, they already know that a change would benefit them from occurring, and that doing it sooner rather than later has plenty of advantages for them. But for whatever reason, they don't take action. They wait for something external to force their hand, to move them into it. So this is when your threshold of activation has been trained to be further upgraded than it needs to be. And through good, solid coaching and training, we can help people to move their thresholds closer and closer to the heart line of power, so they can make more changes in their life from this intentional, deliberate, outgrid, internally driven sort of place.
Pete, would you say that development is a solution to neutrality?
I would say that in order for development to occur, neutrality is a powerful tool for development to ultimately happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that because if they're too far negative, my goal is to get them to step out of the negativity and not into positivity, but step into neutrality and see if they can just, if they're there, can they now see other options? Yeah, go ahead, Tim, you were about to say what? You muted again. Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
Yeah, on your previous point about moving out grid, I've really seen that in the outplacement business, where someone stayed neutral on their desires, typically out of fear. And then when they were outsourced, I remember this woman in particular. I saw her about a year after she was downsized, and she was very angry when it happened to her. But about a year later, she was almost like a new person. You know, I mean, physically, you could see the change. She was happy. She had started her own business. She said it was something she always wanted to do.
Yep.
But just would not pull the trigger on it.
Right.
And it took the organization, moving her upgrid and causing her to find her happiness.
That's right. That's right. And now, to kind of bring this all to closure, we're talking about the Great Resignation. So a great many people have decided to quit their jobs or whatever. And so right now they're in kind of a neutral place, just for the sake of this conversation. Hopefully they're not downgrid. Maybe they are, but we'll put them neutral at least. Well, unless the money that the government has given them, or the money they've saved or whatever, puts them into the realm of the independently wealthy, I think that sooner or later something external is going to impose itself on their reality, and they're going to move upgrid. I would rather that they work with someone to help them discover what's next for them. What do they really want to do, so that that change can occur out-grid, again, more deliberate, intentional, driven by one's personal desires, because otherwise they're just going to wait and wait and wait. And unfortunately, if they wait too long, they may be underestimating how many resources they actually have, how long things could actually take. And that's going to mean that they can't be as selective as they otherwise could have been had they adopted this "let me find what's next and best for me" kind of mindset that could happen out-grid. So I don't have any problem at all with the fact that they've all, done this resignation, but that state they've created in their reality for the vast majority of them can be temporary at best. And then what? Yeah, thoughts about that before we end for the day?
It just seems like a limiting position.
It can be. That's the whole point of, like, that toxic neutrality coming in, going like, oh, it's not bad enough yet. It's not bad enough yet. No, we can handle that. So they're staying here where they need to go. No, the handwriting is on the wall. The clock is ticking. So do something. And now, but I don't want them to reactively do it. I'd like them to do it intentionally. And that requires a different professional work with. So David, thoughts about that before we?
No, that's generally the position that I move people. I find people who are up-grid and try to get them into a state where they can think rationally about their options.
Yeah.
But it usually ends up being an out-grid maneuver to get them to take action.
Yep. And hopefully, again, as I've said several times now, these bands are not of uniform width. Hopefully they've got a very wide positive band. So once you move them there, they get energized, they stay focused, and they don't get too discouraged. That's the negativity part that's out there. Why am I jumping through these hoops? Why am I trying to prove that blah, blah, blah? Don't they know I'm the greatest thing that ever walked? They should just hand me a job with double the salary they're offered. It's like we don't want to move them there. Hopefully their positive band is much wider.
Well, and that was the whole intent yesterday, was to widen that positive band.
Yeah.
Try and get rid of the negativity.
Yep. Because in the long run, the negativity, while healthy negativity, has a certain value, when it starts to tip its toe into the toxic side of things, there's nothing there of any value.
Right. All I can say is when I see people reacting, I know that down-grid maneuvers are in their future.
There you go. It's got to be down and out. That's what we got to do. Move them down first, then move them out. So we got to do. And if they're too lazy down here, up and out. But with the reality of our world in the past couple of years, at least, it's mostly down and out.
Just out.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. We will chat again next week. If you've got a subject you'd like me to jump on, I'm happy to do that. But I think we've chatted about this one enough for now. So with that, thanks, everyone, so much. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk again soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Again.